This is a 2011 Chevy Express van, and it's got the 6.6 liter Duramax. This is an LML, and when the LMLs came out, they changed the pumps from the CP3 to the CP4. So the CP4 is the high pressure pump, and they had issues with that. And the high pressure pump, they say around 200,000 miles they just explode, and when they explode they send metal through the injectors and through the return fuel system, which is bad. So to avoid a $10,000 repair bill, they make a $250 upgraded high pressure regulator. And the high pressure regulator has an upgraded screen. I think it's an 8-micron screen versus the factory screen, which is a 20-micron screen. And they also have issues with the 20-micron screen delaminating from the high pressure regulator. So to avoid future issues, we put in a upgraded high pressure regulator, and that high pressure regulator is right, if I can get it to focus, right there. So it's just beyond that hose, and it is a real pain to get to. I actually used a endoscope camera that I got on Amazon for like 40 bucks to get to that, and then to see what I was doing back there. I don't think I could have done it without it, unless you remove this housing. If you remove this housing, it would be way easier. So if you're going to do thermostats on these vans, then and you feel like changing that out, that's the time to do it. So to have that gone, I had the air compressor, air conditioning compressor, excuse me, removed and out of the way, and that was a must as well. So you got to take, there's like 3 bolts on that, one there, one there, and one there, and it's pretty easy to just, I just hung it out of the way. I hung it over here. So yeah, to get to that, that's got to come out. So here's another thing that I ended up doing. This is a this is the original alternator. I've got a brand new alternator over here. So I put a new alternator here, and then this is the original alternator that we put on. And here's a bracket that I got off of Rock Auto. So Rock Auto sells this bracket for like, I think it's like 15 bucks or something, so it's pretty cheap. And then I bought a pulley. So you have to add this pulley. So the plate here already has holes drilled and tapped for the pulley, and then this hole mounts the bottom part of the alternator. That hole is already there, and it has threads on the other side. So you have to buy a couple of bolts. These are the 13mm bolts. The 15mm bolts might be a better fit, but I'm not sure. So I use the 13s and they seem to work. I know these other pulleys over here have 15mm bolt heads, but they seem to be the same thread. So I don't know why the 13mm bolt worked, but it worked, and it's on there. So I got a new water pump on it. The factory harmonic balancer's got to come off to get to that. So you got to remove that bolt, which is a big pain. We ended up using the starter. So we put the socket on there and then braced it against the pitman arm, and then cranked the motor, and then that came right off. So, and then to torque it back down, the factory says to torque it to 100 foot-pounds and then turn it 90 degrees. So that's what the service manual says. This hose here, we're supposed to replace this hose while we're in here, because it's a weak link, and if it goes, you don't want to have to tear all this stuff out to get to it again. So back to the alternator. You hook up one wire. Also, you have to get the harness, this little connector here. You have to get that as well, and I bought that at Rock Auto as well. So the wire goes up into this loom, and I pulled this apart and I found the orange wire from this side. So this harness here, you just connect the orange wire, which is the turn on signal for the alternator. So I ended up opening this wiring harness, and lo and behold, there was an orange wire there. So I stuck a needle in it and then found continuity between this plug and that needle, and then stripped the insulation back, soldered it together, and then I used electrical tape to kind of insulate it, which I hate using electrical tape because it just turns to goo later on, but that was really my only option unless it was cutting the wire, and I just didn't want to cut that particular wire. So, and use shrink tube and all that. So that's hooked up with that harness. Let's see. That's pretty much it for the motor. Put new thermostats in it. Okay, and for the fuel system, fuel contains air entrapment on diesels. You guys probably already know about that. So to fix that problem and kind of help the CP4 along, I decided to get one of these Fass systems. So this is the factory water separator. These have two separate filters. One's a water separator, and then the factory fuel filter goes where I put the Fass system. So I just removed the factory filter, fuel filter housing, and there are a couple mounting bolts up here for the factory fuel filter. And those two bolts, I just use this one plate. There's another plate that came with the Fass system, but I didn't use that. So I used this one plate, and I had to massage that plate a little bit to get those bolts to fit through. I had to drill it out a little bit. So that mounted up pretty nicely there, and that worked really well. So I've got a couple little additions that I put in here. I added this is a temperature sensor. It's actually for the transmission. I got it with a glow shift set of gauges, so I'm going to hook it up to the fuel and monitor fuel temperature. I don't know, I just figured that the factory system has a transmission temperature sensor in it anyway, so I'll just use that if I can find it in the DIC. So another thing that was added is the coolant line. So the coolant line goes from here, which is the heater core. Let's see, get it to focus. So that's from the heater core, or to the heat exchanger in the back for the rear heat and air conditioning. So I tapped into that line and put a little ball valve here. So this ball valve will stop the coolant flow in the summer when you don't need it. So I've got heat in the winter, I can shut it off in the summer. But this will polish the fuel, and I hope it helps that CP4 last for a really long time. That's the goal. So that is my Chevy Express van. I could show you the inside too, but I'll have to do that later because it's all torn apart.